we have to just play around in the shell a little bit so we can understand how to actually access that data in the first place before we render it out. So to access it, let's go ahead and jump into our terminal. And I'm in the root of my Django project where manage.py is. I do have my server running, but you don't necessarily have to do that. Let's go ahead and jump into python manage.py, shell. Also, I'm assuming that you have this exact model, our product model. You can have any model you want, but make sure you have one model. And I'm going to go ahead and import that from products.models, import product. Okay, so if you're not familiar with how these imports work, you might want to go back a little bit, but basically we're going from that app, looking at that model module, that's a mouthful, and then we're importing product. And to get any single product item, we can do product.objects.get, and then we want to use an ID like argument here. So ID equal to 1, I hit enter, and I get back whatever that object is. Now I can set this to a variable itself. So let's say obj equals to that. And then in here, I could do something like dir obj to see all of the different things I can actually hit on this, right? So there are other intuitive ways on how to do this, but this is maybe a natural way. If you're familiar with Python, you would just use dir to see all of the methods that you might have on here or attributes that you might have on here. One of them is ID, one of them is price, title, summary, right? So a lot of these are unique to my model. Now, of course, that data is also coming from here, and a lot of built-in things that Django has itself in models.model. So realistically, you'd probably do obj.title or something along those lines, right? So obj.title is unique to this model, and it allows me to grab the title that I've saved in the database. So now we sort of understand a little bit more on how to actually grab some data. Hopefully you're wondering where the heck did ID come from and this get call. We'll explain that in a little bit, but let's go ahead and exit out of the shell for now. And let's go ahead and create our first view where we're rendering out this actual data. So whatever this data is. So I'm going to open up my views inside of the product app again. And I mean, the reason I'm moving it out of the view of this other one, if you've been following along, has to do with congruency, right? So you want to make sure that everything related to your products is inside of your product app. So if you're rendering out a view that's related to one product, that should probably be in your product app. There are exceptions to that, but just keep that in mind. So all I'm going to do here is say def, and I'll just call this product detail view. Without getting into too much explanation, just stay with the naming conventions that I have. So like product underscore detail view, we're going to show one product. That's why we're calling it a detail view. And I'll go ahead and put in the request here, and then it returns render, and it takes request, some template name, and then some context. So of course we have to create our template itself. So let's go ahead and write product/detail.html, right? So I did add a slash. Now, if you've been following me, you haven't seen that yet. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. And the next thing is the actual context here. So I'm going to go ahead and do from.models. I'm doing a relative import here. So from.models, import the product class. And this is where sometimes people get a little bit off. First of all, they might name a function like a class. So don't uppercase functions. Keep them lowercase. Secondly, you might put something like product here. That's not a good idea. Just make sure that it's explicit to what it is. So we're looking at a detail of a product. That's why you want to put that product view there. So just like in the shell, we did product.objects.get ID equals to 1. Now, there's a really good chance that this was an error for you, and I'll explain why. We jump into the admin. So let's go into our admin here, and we go into products. I actually have 2 products in here, right? You might have a lot more, or you might have 0, but my model actually has some items in here. So if I click on this first one, I see there's a number right up here. That is actually the ID. We can also look at the other product. That's the other ID, 1, 2. But if we look at our model, there is no ID here. Well, that has to do with Django's built-in features. One of them is that it has an auto-incrementing ID, which you can see in the migrations, in the initial file, we see there's this ID of auto field. So it automatically creates that for us. We don't have to do anything. Another win for Django. Okay, so how do I actually create the context here, right? So the context is just an empty dictionary by default. And what context do I want to put in here? Well, I can put stuff like title, and again, that was obj.title. I can put stuff like description and obj.description, right? You could fill out the rest on whatever you want to show up on the model. This context, again, goes into my template, but I actually have to create that template. So without getting to too advanced level stuff of where we can locate or load our templates, which I'll talk about literally in the next one, we're going to make a new folder in this template folder here called product. And inside of that folder, we're going to make a new file called detail.html. That's all you have to do. So if you want to have directories inside of your templates, you just make a directory in there and make sure you add that slash. Put it the same slash as that way, regardless of what system you're on. It should still work. Okay, cool. So we've got detail.html, and with detail, we want to extend. So extends base.html. Of course, this is continuing from previous videos, so make sure you watch those. And we do block content, and we do just in block. There we go. That's standard. We've created our template. Let's go ahead and make sure we import our view to our URLs. So in our URLs, we're going to go ahead and import the product view. So we'll do from products.views, import product detail view. That's the name of the view, of course. And then finally, I'm just going to go ahead and make a new path here, and we'll call it product. And it just takes in product detail view. Cool. And I'm just going to go ahead and do an H1 here and say item. Okay. So let's go back into our project, go into product. Cool. If you don't have this, stop, go check the code against GitHub, do all that. Like I just breeze through a lot of things because we've already done this. But what we haven't done is seen how to actually render out some objects data. So like some database objects data. In this case, I actually already did it. So you might already intuitively know, hey, I can just do curly brackets title here. And then I can do, something like p tag description here. And so on. Okay. Save it. Refresh it here. We've got a new product. Looks like I don't have a description, so I don't need to worry about that. But of course, this is a good opportunity to use a condition. We could say if description, and then we'll just render out the description. Otherwise, we'll say coming soon. Or rather, probably say something like description coming soon. And there we go. Perfect. So again, if description is not none, you could do all sorts of like conditions in here that work in Python as well. So those are Python conditions. Is not equal like that. In this case, it's not actually equal to none. So we would want to say and description is not equal to an empty string, which it very well could be. And that's what it was. Cool. A little bit more about conditions. That's something that's great about watching these tutorials and building something real. Okay, so now that we've got that, we've actually rendered out our template. We've rendered out an object. But there is one thing that's really disadvantageous to this method. So if we look back into our view, what I have to do is I have to map my object's context, right? So every thing that's in my object, meaning every field here, I would have to map it to the context itself. That's okay, but it adds an extra step. Meaning, if I ever change my model or I want to have new data in my HTML, I also have to go in my view. And that's a little inefficient. So what we want to do instead is, instead of all this, just get rid of that, or let's just comment it out. I'll leave it in there for reference for you guys. So we do content, and we say object is obj. So that now the context object is object, right? So the context variable is object. So inside of our detail here, we could then just do object.detail object.title, object.description, object.description, object.description. Yes, I will promise that I won't repeat that again. And then object.price, right? So now I can actually change my template whenever I want and not really worry too much about this detail view, right? Oh, we got an error. What happened? Object.title, is that not the name? It is title. So object should be in there, should have rendered, but perhaps we didn't save our view. We didn't. Okay, cool. So this is now rendering that stuff out. All from the database. Really cool. And of course you can play around, change things, do all that. I realize this one was a little bit longer, but it's kind of comprehensive to a few things that we just learned. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to get everything.